Okay, good afternoon. My name's Kevin Jose. I'm a global principal of IDAS Architects, based here in Singapore. Today we're going to look at facade and building envelope design from an architect's perspective. How do I go through? We'll look at some facade drivers, and then we've got some examples of our work, 3 commercial, 2 infrastructure, which have got quite different approaches to building and facade designs. Then I will take you through case study number 1, World Trade Center 3 in Jakarta, which Paul has already introduced, but I'll go through it from the other side of the table, from the architect's perspective, and then look at a project that we designed last year, just after COVID hit, and how that impacted A, the design, and B, the way that we designed the building in a completely virtual environment. Facade design drivers. So there's different types of facades we'll look at today, not just the typical curtain wall, but also cladding systems, roofing is a major element of some of the designs that we've done. What are the things that a facade and roof has to do? Well, I try and keep the water out most of the time, control air, potentially sound, maximize light in where appropriate, and balance that with views against the heat. And then there's the other types of things like fire, pollution, security. It was a major concern when we did Marina Bay Sands, and explosions from the outside, which was actually considerable on Marina Bay Sands. Many types of material, not just glass. We looked at titanium, we've looked at stainless steel, stone cladding, used to do a lot of that. That was always good fun. And now bronze, copper, more kind of exotic materials, and really looking at other kind of ways of potentially moving away from completely glass boxes. And then integrating into our facades and roofs other specialist lighting, signage, blinds, shades, louvers, both decorative and operable. And now we've been asked to look at introducing openable windows into what was previously fully contained curtain walls. And that's in response to people's perception of the risk of pandemics in the future. Things that we have to consider, budget. Sometimes we're accused of not taking that seriously enough, but we do. Budget, time, codes and regulations, obviously, authorities, available skill sets, which is designing for the environment where the building is going to be built. So it has to be able to be built easily, ease of construction, durability, quality control, and environmental. I mean, that's becoming more and more prevalent, as it should, as we design buildings moving forward. So we'll look at a couple of examples of buildings that we've done as a group, both in China, Hong Kong, and then down into Indonesia, which have, some of them have quite, I would say, radical facades. So this is a building that's designed by our Shanghai team out of Ken Wai in Shanghai, but the building's actually in Chongqing, and it's a world-class twisting tower. About 60,000 square meters. It was completed, or it will be completed early next year. It's almost complete now. We were the design architects. Sorry. So the project is not just a sculptural kind of statement. It also responds to the immediate city and how it will be viewed from the immediate environment. So it's really looking at 2 parts of the building. One is very rectilinear, and the other one has these rather wonderful double curves, which reflect the sun, where the sun rises, and at night, its reflections that allude to quite a poetic kind of philosophy. So in designing it, obviously, we use BIM, and we have to study carefully how we can actually make the facade realizable in the real world. And we did a lot of work in terms of both technical, in terms of how to prove out that the actual building could be built. Large scale 3D printed prototypes, and these were a good kind of effective communication channel with all parties, both our team, engineers, client, and ultimately the curtain wall and the contractors. And then the building is crowned with a very kind of quiet podium, if you like, at the top of the building. So this is a rendering of the building showing the extravagant curved facade and then the rectilinear facade next to it. And these are photos of the completed building. So as you can see, this is the main twisting element of the building. And again, it was a matter of how do you take that design philosophy and then realize it in the real world. This is a building that we did in Zhuhai, tallest building in Zhuhai, about 340 meters, recently completed. It's a mixed-use development. It's about 219,000 square meters, and it was completed, I think, last year. And it's a tower and podium. This is podium and then the tower. It has retail at the base. It's conference and exhibition, MEP spaces, office, clubhouse, and then apartments as you get to the top of the tower. And many of our projects in China, they have a kind of philosophy behind them, a metaphor, which is very important in terms of conveying the sense of metaphor to the client. And this one was the 9 dragons. And we take the building, and basically it's a basic block, and then we introduce certain elements of the brief, of the philosophy, and that then starts to develop the dynamic form and a smooth transition between the high-rise super element and the low-rise podium. And again, more and more now, parametric design is something that we are employing to understand these quite extreme facades and extreme forms, so we can rationalize them down into a number of glass panels. So not every glass panel is different, which would obviously be commercially unsustainable. So this allows the design team, the full team, to design and realize the design and minimize construction cost. So this is the finished building that shows the transition between the tower and how it kind of smoothly translates into a rather dramatic twisting form at the base of the tower. And again, showing how the podium and the twisting facade and how the expression is taken up through to the super tall tower. And again, it's extremely complex, and we have to find ways to rationalize it to make it buildable within reasonable economic constraints. But it's a beautiful building, very poetic building. These are more shots, the podium and the various kind of undercroft of the podium, showing how we've developed the facades and the roof, and the facades become one. This is a building in Beijing, organic urban oasis. 5 towers. A little bit calmer than the other 2 examples I've shown today. About 500,000 square meters, completed 2 or 3 years ago. We were the design and the project architects on these towers in Beijing. I won't go through that in detail. It's really looking at how you locate towers in a green public space and allowing the nature to run through the development. 5 separate sites, and seeing how the facades can reflect the city skyline. And, this kind of shows how, again, we start with a fairly simple idea, traditional continuous louvers, and then we look at other options of punched louvers in the facades, and then going back to the design philosophy, which was to depict bamboo and trees. It was really made this kind of quite dramatic gesture for where the refuge floors are and the various layering of the facades. And this shows the overall development, and really quite sculptural, how the tower exists and how the towers meet the ground. And again, the metaphor of the bamboo, the tree trunks, and nature coming through the buildings. How does the building meet the ground? It mimics the roots grounded to the earth. So it's all very kind of, it's based on commercial building, but a very kind of poetic idea. This shows the juxtaposition of the site, the views, and those relationships between the towers is important. And then ultimately, a typical example of how we document the buildings. As I say now, most of our buildings are in BIM, which is allowing us to do more complex geometries. At the other end of the spectrum, we also design large, complex infrastructure projects. This is Midfield Concourse, a green airport in Hong Kong. Completed 2015, about 120,000 square meters. And one of the main drivers here was looking at a smart green airport, how to move that kind of building type forward with latest technology and really responding to environmental considerations. So the existing airport and the new Midfield airport here. And we introduced more than 35 green features, low energy lighting, high performance glazing, solar shading, north facing skylights, again, to take advantage of maximizing natural light while reducing solar heat gain. So really built up on from very pragmatic responses to some of the drivers determining facade and roof design. So here's the inside, a large span, single span roof for the concourse. Roof shading, and then curtain walling, high performance curtain wall for the facades. But everything expressed, structure expressed, more kind of rational than the design of some of the commercial towers. And here we see the main spaces, the north facing skylights, overhangs allowing plenty of natural lighting, but controlling glare and heat gain. Again, an expression inside of the roof design and what that does to the space inside. The facade and the roof, ultimately, it's about the user experience of the people in the airport. Another large infrastructure project that we recently completed is the Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge border crossing facility. This was designed by IDIS in conjunction with Rogers. And again, it's a large, if you like, industrial building. And the idea here, looking at this, is looking at roof as a major kind of containment element of facade. And again, it's the architecture, the expression of the roof gives kind of reinforces wayfinding. So it has a real practical reason in terms of how the building is used. Again, it's using ideas of natural light, controlling heat, and also in terms of modular construction. That is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in terms of the buildings that we design. And a simple shot, the design philosophy, the roof reflecting the waves of the surrounding sea. And again, key elements of the design, fabricated off-site, allowing for much better kind of quality control. And the design was taken to allow repetition and standardization of elements. And a shot of the building. Nobody in there at the moment, don't know where they all are. And again, no facade really, just a roof, beautiful structure, very elegant, elegant building built up from first responses to some of the design principles impacting facade. Paul talked about this a little bit earlier. I'll maybe give you a slightly another perspective. When we designed World Trade Center 3 in Indonesia, we've done World Trade Center 2, which was very successful. And we knew that the form of the building was predetermined really by looking at what was commercially going to give the client the best opportunity for the best rental returns in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And that was quarter, window, and those kind of things. So the form of the building was pretty well predetermined. We determined it with the client. So this is a completed building, podium, World Trade Center 3, and the building beyond. But it took a long time to get us there. We started off by really trying to break down the tower, not introducing all curtain walls, some solid wall, playing with the forms of the building, bringing a curve in underneath, expressing the mechanical floor, refuge floor. Then we went to different cladding systems, and we really wanted to get this kind of play of light on the tower, on different facades, on the north and east, contrasting with the north and south. And we took that forward. We worked with the client, we worked with Mark and Jim and Paul and the team, and we distilled it down into two basic kind of design options. One which had solid cladding, which I was quite keen to try and achieve, and the other was looking at how to interpret that through just purely curtain wall. And this was the one with solid panels, originally going to be stainless steel, which I think would have been quite beautiful, and then how to take that idea and look at it in terms of fritting, and also look at whether it was fully floored ceiling glass or whether we had an upstand. This was with solid panels, a play of solid elements within a plane of glass. And then we did a lot of detailed studies. This facade remained pretty similar with all options, and this was the one that we developed to some degree of detail. So again, we costed it out. We looked at, with the facade consultant, Meinhardt, how we could build it, the geometry, how we can make it work. And over a period of weeks and months, we went through this with the client, evaluated it, built models, and it was an extensive testing period of ideas, and eventually we decided with the client on the fully glazed fritted option, but with a pattern that kind of reminded us of the spandrel idea, contrasting with the other shorter facades. And this was kind of close to the final design. We looked at the roof treatment, but it was really quite clear to us we wanted 2 planes of glass with either frit or spandrel panel, contrasting with these facades, which was basically a pattern determined by the transoms. Practical considerations, BMU, plant on the roof was all taken into consideration. And then we built models. We built many models, presented it to the client, and finally came to an agreed solution. The last project I want to share with you is a project that we started last year. I think we won the competition in March, and about the day after we won the competition, everything went into lockdown, and it was quite a challenge. It was quite interesting to see how we could communicate as a team within IDAS, B, how we could communicate with consultants, and C, how we could communicate with the client in Jakarta without being able to fly there. And it proved quite successful, although I must admit the lockdown at the moment is becoming a little tiresome. So as we started to develop the scheme, which is basically a Soho office, residential, this was the residential, Soho office, retail podium and car park, we started to look at considerations that were really coming out from the COVID crisis, especially on the podium. How do we introduce natural ventilation? How do we bring nature into the building? How do we kind of generate ideas that will future-proof it to a certain extent against COVID? And this is then from the form, we started looking at the typical facades. We started looking at bringing nature into the building, through the building, up and over the building. We really wanted to accentuate natural ventilation and greenery through the podium especially. And looking at the planes and breaking down the mass of the building, north and south facades having the main glazing, east and west, again, very limited glazing to respond to the solar gain issues of the rising and setting sun in Jakarta. And these were further models as we developed this with a green podium, refuge decks, planted refuge decks, planting on the roof of the tower. And from that, over a period of months, all working remotely with the client, never actually meeting each other, we developed the schematic design to some degree of detail. The Resi Tower, the Soho Tower, and the podium car park naturally ventilated. How do we bring greenery up into this? This was our kind of schematic deliverable, really looking at responding to those ideas. And screens, we like the ideas of natural screens, timber screens, aluminium screens to look like timber, but again, natural ventilation both through the car park. And then at the podium pods of retail, of F&B, a lot of planting climbing up over the building, cantilevered planters, but really kind of breaking down the indoor-outdoor experience. And then the typical kind of Soho office, how do you introduce MEP? How do you coordinate all of those elements into a coherent whole? And a not expensive building, obviously responding to the client's commercial requirements. And then the final renderings, and this is looking into the retail. So we have a naturally ventilated grand stair. We have natural ventilation into the podium, kind of F&B pods, greenery above, greenery around, really kind of responding both to our desire to bring the wonderful landscaping of Jakarta, Indonesia into the development, and also responding a bit to COVID in terms of people didn't want air-conditioned glass boxes and natural materials. And this was the grand stair from the entry plaza leading up into the building and then looking into the main podium. Entertainment, outdoor entertainment areas, screening, roofing, all of those kind of elements. Basically, we took it to the end of schematic design. And then finally, just a rendering of the final development. I think as we move forward as designers, hopefully more opportunities to really kind of break down the barriers between indoor and outdoor and really look at environmental considerations, and also as we move forward, real considerations responding to the potential for further pandemics. And that's some of the work that we've been doing, both around Asia and Indonesia. Thank you, and that's IDAS.